You can always tell when your kid is being left out. It's not in the bruises, it's in the way they go quiet when they used to narrate their whole morning. The boys at school told him he didn't belong because he wore glasses, wasn't strong enough, and didn't have the right cleats to play football with them. They mocked me, too, called me the Bimbo, whispered that I was probably looking for a sugar daddy, told each other I didn't look smart enough for this neighborhood. I used to think people like that were just confident. Now I know better. People who go out of their way to exclude others? They're not strong. They're not confident. They're not winning. They're afraid. Afraid of being seen for who they really are when the labels fall away. Quick favor before we move on. Over 88% of listeners haven't subscribed yet. If you're enjoying our stories, hit that like button and subscribe. It's completely free and helps our stories reach more listeners like you. Thank you for watching. Now let's continue. My son, Mason, kept trying through it, quietly, bravely. He tied his cleats like he was suiting up for the Super Bowl. He packed extra Gatorade for boys who would never share theirs back. And every time he got benched, he just said, "Maybe next game." I've talked to the teachers, sent polite emails, asked about recess supervision. They all say the same thing. We'll keep an eye out. But somehow he keeps coming home with bruises, bent glasses, and silence. I moved to Westbrook for the schools. That's what I told people. But really, I moved here because I thought maybe it would feel safe. Tree-lined streets, pristine lawns, a coffee shop that served oat milk lattes to women waiting for their next spa treatment. It was the kind of place where kids drove to school in hand-me-down BMWs and moms discussed college prep in their newly remodeled high-end kitchen. The kind of place where struggle had no place to settle. I didn't fit the part, but at first I tried. I really did. I stopped wearing anything that revealed my silhouette, stopped doing my hair the way Jake liked it, bought cardigans from Target to blend in, wore sneakers instead of heels. I even parked around the corner so no one would see what type of car I was driving. I'd spent years managing Jake's social media during his championship run, but now I just wanted to disappear. But none of it mattered because once they label you, it sticks. And the label they gave me was Barbie, married to a musclehead. Probably not so bright. Westbrook isn't openly cruel. It's just quiet about it. Controlled. Polished. The kind of place where no one says the mean thing to your face. They say it behind your back, then smile when you show up with cookies to the PTA meeting, like Madison's mom, Ashley. She's the type who wears a tennis skirt to Trader Joe's and somehow always has perfect blowouts, even at 7 a.m. drop-off. She doesn't say much to me directly, just little things, like the time she tilted her head and said, "Oh, I love how you don't care about doing your hair every day. That's so refreshing." Or when she asked, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Are you Mason's stepmom?" I told her no, I was his mom. Her smile froze a little. "Oh, I just thought, never mind." And the others? They just nodded like they already knew the punchline. I stopped going to school events after that. It wasn't worth the way they looked me up and down, like they were trying to figure out how someone like me ended up here. Like I was an ad that didn't load properly. I tried to keep Mason away from it, shield him, encourage him, cheer the loudest when he made it to practice on time. But he felt it too, especially with Coach Daniels. He's the kind of man who thinks boys become men through toughness, who praises the biggest kid for discipline when he elbows someone too hard during flag football. Mason's not built like that. He's wiry, quick on his feet, smart. But every time he stepped on the field, Coach's voice would go dull like Mason wasn't worth the volume. One time, Mason made a clean pass, got the ball to Drew, the quarterback's kid, and Drew fumbled it. The team lost the scrimmage. Coach didn't say a word to Drew, but when Mason walked off the field, sweaty and hopeful, Coach just shook his head and muttered, "This isn't chess, son." That was the first time I saw Mason flinch. He didn't cry. He didn't argue. He just nodded, tucked his hands in his sleeves, and walked back to the bench. He stopped bringing his football to school after that. At home, he still asked to toss it in the yard sometimes, just me and him. But I could see the shift. The joy was gone. He threw with more force than usual. And when he missed the catch, he didn't laugh. He clenched his jaw and blamed the wind. Some nights, when he thought I wasn't looking, I'd catch him sitting on his bed, holding that football against his chest, not playing, just holding it like it might disappear too. For his birthday, I invited the whole class. The RSVPs trickled in. Can't make it. Out of town that weekend, one after another, so we canceled the party. Instead, I took Mason into town to let him pick out his own gift, just something small to lift the day. And that's when we saw them, the boys from his class, their moms, sitting outside the ice cream shop, laughing, cones in hand. The same ones who said they wouldn't be in town. Mason didn't say much, just looked up at me and asked, "Can we go home now?" I nodded. We turned around. And we did. At pickup, the moms clustered like they were in a group chat I'd never be added to. They wore their activewear like uniforms and talked about Pilates, family trusts, and ski season. I stood alone, pretended to check my phone. One of them, Lindsay, once said, "It's so amazing how involved you are. Most moms with your background work 2 jobs." I smiled. But inside, something twisted. Moms with my background? She meant poor. She meant uneducated. She meant you don't belong here, but good for you for trying. And the worst part, she thought it was a compliment. I tried to laugh it off, said something about having flexible hours. She blinked. "Oh, right. Your husband's the trainer, isn't he?" I smiled politely. "Something like that." She looked satisfied, like she'd just solved a puzzle with 5 missing pieces. Let her think whatever made her feel smarter. People like Lindsay don't want answers. They want boxes to put you in. And I wasn't going to give her the right one. They had no idea who Jake really was. Steady, gentle, the kind of man who made pancakes before the sun came up and read bedtime stories in funny voices just to hear Mason laugh. He never yelled. Not once. But that's not what they saw. They saw tattoos, fighter's ears, a jawline that looked like it belonged in a warning sign. And they judged him, just like they judged me. Quickly, quietly, completely wrong. They don't see the bruises on Mason's arms. They don't care that his glasses have been bent 3 times this semester. They just see a woman they don't understand and a boy who doesn't belong. But something shifted in me that week. I stopped waiting for them to include us. I stopped pretending I didn't see the way Mason looked at the ground during recess, the way he sat alone on the steps, the way no one passed him the ball. I stopped hoping the school would fix it. Because the truth is, they weren't going to. And the next time someone knocked him down on purpose, when it happened right in front of my face, I wasn't going to stay quiet. I wasn't going to play nice. I was going to make the call. And I knew exactly who I'd call. One afternoon, I was passing by his room when I saw his door slightly open. He was sitting on his bed, holding that football against his chest. He wasn't playing, just holding it. His head was down. I heard him sniff quietly and wipe his face with the back of his sleeve. I didn't say anything, didn't go in. I just stood there, frozen. Like if I moved, I'd fall apart. This was the breaking point. Watching my brave boy finally crack under the weight of trying so hard to belong. At pickup the next day, I watched all the other boys come out in packs, shoving, laughing, swinging backpacks at each other like puppies off a leash. Mason came out alone, hands buried in his hoodie, eyes down. He was almost to the car when one of the boys jogged up behind him and kicked his backpack. It hit the ground, spilled open. His notebook slid into the dirt. The boy just laughed and ran off. The rest of them followed. Mason didn't yell, didn't cry, just knelt down and started collecting his things, one by one, like he didn't want to make a scene. I got out of the car and helped him. He said, "It's not a big deal, Mom. I probably packed it too full." I didn't say anything. I just nodded. But my throat burned. I'd emailed the school about peer behavior the week before. They wrote back, "We'll keep an eye on it." They never did. The moms? Worse. They stood around in closed circles, whispering in low, hushed voices, clearly gossiping. When I walked by, their arms folded, their bodies tensed, and their circles tightened. I could see their eyes sneaking sideways glances at me. None of them said hi, just flipped their hair and turned cold shoulders. They didn't speak to me unless they had to, and when they did, it was always a performance. Like Lindsay. At drop-off one morning, she glanced over while I read the school policy handout. Do you need help understanding the school policies? They can be so confusing. Then added, So, what does your husband do again? I always forget. I paused. He's in fitness. Her smile tightened. Ah, right. Like a trainer? I nodded. Something like that. She looked relieved. That makes sense. They all assumed Jake was some sweaty guy with a clipboard yelling at people in a basement gym. It made them feel better, like they had us figured out. Let them think that. For Mason's birthday, we invited the whole class. And the party we threw? Only one kid came, and he left early. Mason told me maybe they were just busy. Maybe we should try a different date next year. Or maybe just go bowling. Just us, he said. That might be easier. After he went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table and stared at the untouched party favors. They were themed. Football stickers, toy whistles, candy with wrappers I picked because he said they looked official. I threw them away without ceremony, one by one. Not because I was angry, because I had nothing left to feel. I knew what they were doing. I knew what they thought of me. The mom with the simple job, the basic questions, the family that clearly comes from a different background, the mom who married some overbuilt, undereducated fitness guy and was probably riding it as far as she could. They didn't know who Jake really was, and that was going to be their mistake. Because the day they decided to humiliate my son in front of me would be the last time they ever saw him as weak. 3 weeks later, everything came to a head. It was supposed to be a school spirit event. A Saturday scrimmage, 2 fifth-grade flag football teams, parents in lawn chairs, kids in school colors, music from a Bluetooth speaker skipping every third beat. The boys never pushed Mason in front of a teacher. They didn't have to. They did it quietly, like professionals, like they'd practiced it. They rolled their eyes when he joined the game, dropped passes on purpose when he made a clean throw, made sure there were just enough players when he asked to join, and then let in someone else 5 minutes later. Jake had planned to come, but that morning he'd pulled me aside and said, "Maybe I'll sit this one out. I don't want to make it about me." He said it gently, the way he always does when he's trying to protect me from something unspoken. I think he knew Mason had been having a hard time. I think part of him thought his presence might make it worse. I nodded, and honestly, I understood. Jake gets stared at, whispered about. People cross streets when they see him jogging shirtless. He's huge, solid, scars on his knuckles, shoulders like boulders. Every part of him says, "Don't test me." He didn't want to be the story. He wanted Mason to have a chance to just be a kid, so he stayed home. And I went to the game alone. The stands were full of moms in sunglasses, dads with crossed arms and team hoodies. Someone brought a cooler full of sparkling waters. Someone else had a tray of protein bars and gluten-free cookies. I brought orange slices. The team lined up on the field. I scanned for Mason. He was there, near the edge, not in the starting huddle. Helmet slightly too big, arms crossed. He looked small. Coach Daniels shouted positions, called out the names of all the regulars. Mason didn't move. He just nodded and walked toward the sideline. Bench again. A mom behind me muttered, "Well, not everyone's meant for sports." Another laughed. I turned my face toward the field so they couldn't see the way my jaw clenched. The game started. I tried to focus, to clap politely. But I watched Mason instead. He sat straight, hands on his knees, watching the ball like it was a lifeline. Second half, the score was close. Drew, the quarterback's son, twisted his ankle on a run. Coach Daniels cursed under his breath, looked around. "Mason, you're up." My heart jumped. Mason stood, startled, nodded, grabbed his flag belt and jogged onto the field. He took his place. I saw him glance once toward the bleachers, toward me. I gave a thumbs up. He didn't smile. The play started. He ran his route, clean, fast. The ball came flying, high and a little too far, but Mason reached for it, stretched with everything he had, fingertips grazing. Then, thud. Another kid, Brady, the team captain, slammed into Mason from behind. Not flag contact, full body. Mason went down. Hard. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The whistle blew. Late. I stood. "Hey, that wasn't flag. That was—" No one turned. Not even coach. Mason lay still for a second, then pushed himself up slowly. His face was red. I couldn't tell if he was hurt or embarrassed or both. The other boys laughed. One said, loud enough for the bleachers, "Guess that's what happens when you put in the water, boy." Mason turned to walk back toward the line. Then Brady kicked his cleat out just enough to trip him again. Mason fell forward, hands scraping against the turf. No whistle, no timeout. I climbed down from the stands, walked fast across the track toward the sideline. Coach saw me, raised a hand like I was the problem. "Ma'am, please stay off the—" "He was shoved," I said, loud but steady. "And tripped, twice." Coach shrugged. "It's contact football." "It's flag," I snapped, "and the rule is no pushing, no tripping." He blinked. "We'll handle it." "You're not handling anything." I turned. Mason was now sitting on the bench again, eyes locked on the ground. No one sat next to him. The other boys passed a water bottle down the line, skipping him. I looked to the bleachers. Every mom's eyes were forward, focused on the game, pretending they hadn't seen a thing. I pulled out my phone. I called Jake. He picked up on the second ring. "Hey," he said. "Come now." He was quiet for a second. "That bad?" I looked at Mason. "Worse. I'm on my way." It took less than 15 minutes. I spotted him before anyone else did. He stepped out of the car and walked across the lot like he'd already seen everything that happened. He wore a black hoodie and gray joggers. No logos, no flash. But nothing about him blended in. His shoulders stretched the fabric like it was stitched around stone. His hands hung loose at his sides, scarred, veined, relaxed, like they'd broken bones and written lullabies in the same day. Every step he took was quiet, but deliberate, measured, like a man trained to move only when it mattered. And when he stopped at the edge of the field, the air shifted. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Every dad on the sidelines straightened. The group of boys who'd been laughing 2 minutes ago fell silent. Brady fumbled the football in his hands and muttered something under his breath. One of the other kids took a step back, like Jake's presence was gravity, and they felt it in their chests. Coach Daniels noticed too. His voice wavered mid-call-out. The same man who dismissed my son for months suddenly understood he was facing someone who could end careers with his bare hands. Jake didn't glare. He didn't puff up or make a scene. He just stood there, still, calm, towering, shoulders broad as a doorframe, arms that could span a dining table, every muscle earned through years of discipline, every scar a lesson. But it was his stillness that unsettled them, the way his body said I could, but I won't. Unless you give me a reason. He walked to the sideline and stood behind Mason, didn't speak, didn't touch him, just stood there, presence wrapping around our son like armor. Mason didn't see him yet, but every boy on that bench went quiet. Their shoulders tensed. A few of them glanced at each other like, is that his dad? But none of them dared ask out loud. Coach Daniels took a step forward, trying to act unfazed. Jake finally spoke, voice low, controlled. "You training them to hit in flag now?" Just 7 words. But the coach froze like he'd been handed a warning with no second line. Coach Daniel's mouth opens, then closes. He glances at the boys, then at the stands, like he's looking for backup that isn't there. His clipboard drops an inch. I'll talk to them, he mutters. Jake doesn't move, just watches him. And the coach? He backs off like he's just realized who he's standing in front of. One by one, the whispers started. Who's that guy? Is that Mason's dad? He looks familiar. I heard a click. Someone taking a photo on their phone, trying to zoom in without being obvious. Then another dad leaned toward the screen of his phone, froze. He nudged the guy next to him, whispered something. And that's when it started. A ripple of realization, moving row by row across the bleachers like wind across tall grass. They knew, or if they didn't, they were Googling fast. I watched it unfold like a slow-motion replay. One dad whispered, "Holy that's Jake Hall." Another dropped his protein bar. "No way. The Jake Hall? The one from UFC, bro. Still fighting. Still undefeated." And just like that, the same men who once stood tall and smirked at my trainer husband suddenly looked small. Brady's mom, who hadn't looked in my direction all year, adjusted her posture, smoothed her hair, and crossed her legs in a way that screamed new attention. Another mom turned her entire body toward Jake and twisted her mouth into a soft smile, like she just remembered she was single. They didn't say a word to me, not yet. But they didn't have to. I saw it in the way they glanced, the way they whispered, the way they stood up straighter, but still looked down when Jake made eye contact. The same moms who used to ignore me at pickup were suddenly fixing their ponytails and adjusting their tops like they'd walked onto the set of a dating show. And the boys? Their shoulders dropped, not in comfort, in instinct. Every slouch, every snicker, every careless kick they'd thrown Mason's way. They wore it now like a badge they were suddenly ashamed of. Coach Daniels finally spoke up again, holding his clipboard like it was a shield. He cleared his throat. "Hey, Mr. Hall. Sorry for any, confusion earlier. Just a little rough play. We don't encourage it, of course." Jake tilted his head slightly. Didn't speak. The coach's mouth twitched. "I mean, Mason's a great kid. Smart. Real team player. I think some of the boys are just figuring things out. You know how kids are." Jake looked down at Mason, then back up. "You had 10 chances to step in," he said flatly. "And you chose silence. Now you're performing." Coach shifted on his feet. "Of course not. I mean, I'll talk to the boys. We'll go over conduct at Monday's practice." Jake nodded once. No smile. That was enough. Coach backed off. Mason looked up at him, eyes wide. "Dad, they know who you are." Jake put a hand on his shoulder. "Let them." I watched Mason's expression change, not into a smirk, not into pride, but something quieter, something that said, "I feel safe." And me? I just stood there, arms folded, calm as ever. The very people who once looked through us were now looking at us. Moms who once mocked my leggings were blinking fast, like trying to remember if they'd ever said anything too obvious. Dads who once chuckled about my meathead husband were now checking their own posture. Someone whispered, "He used to be called the Hammer. Broke a guy's jaw in 20 seconds. Jake didn't react. He wasn't here for them. He was here for us, and they could feel it, all of them. The way he looked at Mason, like he was the most important thing in the world. The way he stood beside me, like I belonged here more than any of them ever did. For once, they couldn't unsee it, couldn't pretend we were disposable, because the man they judged on rumors was now standing 10 feet from their kids, and he wasn't yelling, he wasn't threatening, he was calm, which made him terrifying, because the loudest person in the room isn't always the most dangerous. Sometimes it's the one who knows they could end you, and chooses not to. We didn't stay for the rest of the game. Jake placed a hand on Mason's shoulder, and without a word, we started walking. No one stopped us. No one said a thing. We passed by the bleachers. Moms who hadn't spoken to me in months suddenly found their phones fascinating. A few gave tight, polite nods. One even tried to smile, but I didn't return it. Let them sit with it. Let them wonder if we knew what they'd said about us. What they'd said about Mason. We got in the car. Jake turned the keys, but didn't drive. Mason sat in the back seat, holding the football he never even got to touch. "I don't want to play anymore," he said. Jake turned around in his seat. "You don't have to." Mason nodded, but he didn't look relieved, just tired. Jake looked at him a long time. "You know," he said, "a lot of the best fighters I met never played team sports. They didn't care about pleasing people. They learned to show up for themselves." Mason stayed quiet. Jake added, "You showed up today. You stood back up after they knocked you down. That's more than most people ever do." For the first time all day, Mason met his eyes. There was no smile, but his chin lifted half an inch. That was enough. The next morning, it began. Texts from numbers I didn't have saved. "Hey, sorry we didn't connect at the game. Would love to do a play date sometime." "Hi, we're doing a team snack rotation. Want to join?" I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Monday morning, we got an email from the principal. Subject: Parent concerns and safety at sports events. It was vague, full of corporate language and phrases like increased supervision and a renewed commitment to respectful play. They didn't say Mason's name, but they didn't need to. Later that week, Coach Daniels stopped me in the hallway. He had his hands in his pockets, eyes darting. "Just wanted to say we're holding a parent meeting to reset expectations, clear things up." I looked at him. "It's too late for clear." He nodded slowly. "Right, I get it." But I don't think he did. Because the truth is, it was never about drills or meetings. It was about how they treated silence like strategy. How they let the small things slide until those small things bent a kid's back and buried his voice. Mason didn't return to the team. He didn't need to. Jake set up a heavy bag in the garage and showed him how to wrap his hands. Not to fight, not to become like them, but to remember what it felt like to hit something and not flinch. He never asked to go back to football. He started drawing instead. Pages of gear sketches, field diagrams, entire game ideas in his notebooks. Jake framed one and hung it in his home office. "This one's my favorite," he told him. Mason lit up just a little. Not a grin. Just lighter. A few weeks later, the PTA chair cornered me after drop-off. "We're hoping to do a safety seminar with local professionals," she said brightly. "Would Jake be willing to come speak?" I stared at her. The same woman who once asked if I was Mason's sister with that smirk that meant you don't belong here. Now she wanted us on a flyer. "No," I said, and walked away. She didn't follow. The next game came and went. We didn't attend. Someone texted a photo of the team huddled around a folding table. "Missing Mason today," it read, followed by a heart emoji. I showed it to Jake. He just raised an eyebrow. "Funny how that works," he said. Mason deleted the message without reading it. No anger, no sadness, just done. And that's what healing looks like sometimes. Not fireworks, not a standing ovation, just a boy who knows who he is again. And parents who refuse to let that be taken from him. We never talked about that game again. Not in our house. Because we didn't need to. Mason stopped flinching when kids walked past him. He stopped staring at the ground when he answered questions in class. He started drawing with purpose, playing music on the old keyboard, laughing out loud at night again. That was enough. Jake never said, "I told you so." He just kept showing up, quietly, completely. And me? I stopped apologizing for how I looked. Stopped shrinking myself to make other people comfortable. Stopped pretending that blending in was ever going to protect us. Because here's the truth. No one says out loud, the cruelest people are usually the most broken. They build walls around themselves and call it strength. They tear others down and call it winning. But real power, real confidence, it never needs to prove itself by making someone else small. So they mock. They whisper. They target the ones who haven't learned to pretend yet. And that's what those boys were doing. That's what their mothers taught them. But we're not here to play their game anymore. We're here to raise a boy who knows the difference between power and cruelty. Who knows that real strength is never loud. And that being kind in a room full of cowards? That's the kind of thing legends are made of. Let them whisper. Our son walks taller in silence than their boys ever did in a crowd.